We are separated, says Stephen Hollier, from the divine, the transcendental. The bridge, so the ancients said, which we may build over this abyss of separation, is constructed by our passionate longing for the greater, and by the passionate longing of the greater for us. This is the fundamental reason, the fundamental background for all the great love stories, all the great lyrical Romeo and Juliet type myths of the world, that there are two, ourselves and the ineffable greatness from which we have come, who are longing for each other with a desperate, painful, suffering passion. And we have within us that vestige of memory of what it was, what it felt like, what it can be. It is practically impossible to imagine the story of Swan Lake without seeing the ballet in one's mind's eye, and without also recollecting Tchaikovsky's heart-rendingly passionate music, specially commissioned by the Bolshoi Ballet for their groundbreaking 1877 Moscow production. Thereafter it seemed that Swan Lake defined the Bolshoi, becoming its great signature piece, and in time it has almost come to define the genre of classical ballet itself. It is certainly the most well-known and perhaps the most well-loved. Who then can now unpick the parts, and is it even useful to do so? Far better, it seems, to accept their inseparability, the alchemy of their union. When a particular retelling of a story grips the collective imagination, when it can stand to be endlessly told and retold, we can be sure it touches upon something profound. Swan Lake might have had its stars over the years, prima ballerinas like Anna Pavlova, and legendary pairings like Margot Fonteyn and Rudolf Nureyev, who have inhabited the story and perhaps even claimed it for a while. Yet Swan Lake, the myth, is bigger than any flesh and blood star that pirouettes across its worldly stage, bigger than any inspired choreographer, any ballet company, even the Bolshoi. So let us then make haste to the theatre and take our seats before the house lights dim down low and the great enchantment begins. The conductor clears his throat and waves his baton imperiously. Tchaikovsky's iconic music strikes up. Hold on to your seats, and hearts for that matter, for you are about to be transported to the very heart of myth. The music swells to a peak, then fades, only to rise again, sweeping our emotions along with it. Tchaikovsky is setting the scene, the tone, a foreshadowing of what is to come, and in so doing, he powerfully brings about the suspension of our collective disbelief before ever the heavy red velvet drapes draw back and the first dancers appear on stage. Long before our tale begins, Odette, a beautiful princess, has fallen under the spell of von Rothbart, a wicked sorcerer, and must live as a swan by day and girl by night, during which time she is imprisoned in a dark tower. The spell that binds her can only be broken by a man who has never loved before and who will vow to love her forever. Odette is everything that is pure and simple and lovely. Yet she is possessed of such naivety that it seems unlikely she will ever find her way free from the wicked curse that entraps her. Yet still she hopes. Well, at last the curtains part to reveal Prince Siegfried's 21st birthday celebration in the grand hall of the palace, where his mother, the queen, tells him he must choose a bride at a ball to be held in his honour the following evening. Yet the prince is overawed and loath to marry for duty alone. He makes his excuses and withdraws to the forest on a moonlit hunting expedition with his friends. Well, this is where the drama really begins, for it is here, deep in the wood beside a shimmering lake, that we are introduced to the lovely Odette, with whom Siegfried falls instantly and hopelessly in love. But wait, I run ahead. Let me tell it from the start. For Siegfried first encounters her as a magnificent swan in full flight coming into land over the lake. He takes aim with his bow, but as he does so, she alights at the water's edge and magically transforms into the most beautiful girl he has ever seen. Amazed, he steps forward to greet her, and at first she is startled, but he gently reassures her and begs her tell him of the marvel he has just witnessed. Odette then tells him of her royal origins and of the terrible spell that entraps her unless she can find a suitor, whereupon Siegfried pledges his undying allegiance and implores her to attend the great ball where he is to choose a wife next day. Odette promises to find a way to escape her tower, and together they dance, falling more and more in love with every passing moment. But as you might imagine, in stories of this sort, all does not go well for the new lovers. For the sorcerer's wicked daughter, Odile, secretly comes to know of their plans. She sets her own sights on the eligible prince and begs her father to give her the outward appearance of Odette so that she may take her place at the ball. And so the theft, the wicked illusion is concocted. And very soon, for the dark magic is strong, it is as if the sorcerer's daughter is herself the beautiful princess. And the only reason we, the audience, will know who is who, for the two parts are very often played by the same dancer, is that Odile, when next we encounter her, will be completely robed in black. And so the curtain falls, the house lights return, and exhausted, yet full of anticipation as to what might now occur, we withdraw to the theatre foyer to briefly collect our wits. Trumpets herald the start of Act 3 and the commencement of the grand ball. Siegfried struts about on tenterhooks, unsure if his beloved will appear. The great hall is full of lovely girls, all willing and eager to catch his eye, and his mother is keen for him to choose. But Siegfried has only one girl in his heart. Trumpets sound again. His heart leaps. The The ballroom doors swing open, and von Rothbart appears, swathed in black, with the girl of the prince's dreams on his arm, or so he is led to believe. Everyone stops in their tracks to admire Odile, for she is truly magnificent. Siegfried bows down low to greet her, and together they take to the floor. Oblivious of the deception, he is utterly enthralled, and before he can check himself and come to his senses, he promises his undying love to the dark impostor and announces his intention to marry her to the entire court. What we see here, writ large, so to speak, is the gullibility of men who fall prey to the seductive charms of the negative anima, to use Jung's term, an aspect of the feminine psyche devoid of all warmth and sensitivity, embodied in classical myth as the siren. So dangerously attractive are these beautiful creatures that sailors who pass by the island where they dwell must be chained to the ship's masts and have their ears stuffed with wax to prevent them succumbing to their deadly charms. Such is the nature of the impostor here. Her dance is sassy and powerfully accomplished, incorporating as it does the impressive 30-turn finale, a feat for any ballerina, and what man could resist? But then the prince looks into her eyes, and then suddenly he knows what we already know. A coldness strikes his heart, but it is much, much too late. The music swells and swells again, and we too are held captive. Odile dances on without care or kind thought, overshadowing all. She is truly triumphant. The lights dim, the scene is at an end, save for the silhouette at the window of a weeping Odette, who has somehow escaped her tower in order to warn of the deception. Fairy tales, myths and legends do not just concern the light, but very much the darker aspects of the self, the shadow, and the struggles one has with it. And we are not always led to the condition of happily ever after, although in a full rendition of a tale within this genre, the promise or hope of redemption is never completely dashed. And so it is with Swan Lake. But first, there are the dark forces to contend with, for our storybook characters, yet sometimes also for the dancers themselves, the choreographers, and those involved in such productions. There is something so powerful about Swan Lake, you see, that even in its reenactment, one may become caught up, so to speak, or even overshadowed by the archetypes at play in a way which can mirror the themes within the story. For the prima ballerina, who must often play both white and black swan, the idea that they are really one and the same, struggling for ascendancy within the self, is at the root of the tale and brilliantly portrayed in the 2010 film Black Swan, where the story, the myth, the fairy tale darkly bleeds through into the everyday, taking hold of those who seek to tell it. pondering these themes, one finds resonances with the dark fairy tale of the red shoes. Where there is great beauty, it seems, there is great shadow too, and each of these ballets express this most powerfully. There is a flavour of the Icarus myth here, he who flies too close to the sun and scorches his beautiful wings. Clarissa Pinkola Estes, in her classic book, Women Who Run with the Wolves, elucidates and develops these themes in her own dramatic retelling of the Red Shoes, and in so doing hints at the nature of the powerful archetypes at play. At the dark end of the spectrum of passion, there is a kind of madness, where desire overtakes, or is indeed overtaken, by the drive for that which is sought, or what itself seeks to be expressed. Here the road to psychosis lies, where one becomes over-identified with the archetype and can no longer step back, like the girl in the red shoes, who at first just longs for the pretty new things, but soon her longing mutates into an addiction, as Estes makes clear. Then the girl is no longer just dancing, but is rather being danced in an incredibly heartless and inhumane way that, if not checked by some miraculous intervention, will lead without doubt to her death. The problem illuminated here, the trap, if you like, of which we all may fall victim, is greatly exacerbated by this over-identification. The temptation to claim the genius as one's own, as part of one's worldly self. Then we may become inflated. The ancient Greeks called it hubris, and it is a dangerous affliction indeed. For then, instead of ecstasy, there is agony. Instead of transcendence, there is psychic collapse. And instead of becoming one of God's athletes, as the ballet dancer first innocently dreams, she is danced to death by the devil. Humility is the safeguard in such matters, of course, as is the ritualistic necessity of stepping down and out of role, of grounding oneself and returning to the everyday. The house lights need to come on, so to speak, for dancers and audiences alike. For the magic spell must be intermittently broken, lest we forget ourselves in the worldly realm. And so at last we come to the final scene. The great storm rages. Siegfried, bursting into the glade, finds Odette and begs for her forgiveness. She tells him she must kill herself, or she will forever be a swan. Siegfried, understanding that his destiny is forever changed, declares he will die with her, thus breaking von Rothbart's power over her. As dawn approaches, von Rothbart appears. The lovers respond to his threat by throwing themselves into the lake. At last, von Rothbart is vanquished and his power is ended. This is the apotheosis of which Joseph Campbell has said, after one's foe has finally been defeated, the hero or heroine experiences a great expansion of consciousness. Those who know that what they and all things really are is the everlasting, dwell in the groves of the wish-fulfilling trees, drink the brew of immortality, and listen everywhere to the unheard music of eternal concord. I have a beautiful friend who many years ago was a ballerina with the English National Ballet. Through her own choice, she left the ballet world completely, even though she could have easily stayed on. She's never looked back, nor attended a single performance since, and has had a whole new career, or incarnation, if you like, as an acupuncturist, far away from the bright lights. Through her, I've come to understand much about this very particular art that I could never otherwise have known. She has taken me behind the scenes, as it were, and allowed me to see some of the pain and sometimes some of the heartlessness that can reside there. But one day, thankfully, in her mid-20s, something inside her decided to shatter the enchantment, the spell of that which held her, and in so doing she experienced her own kind of apotheosis, the death of what was, the indentured self, if you like, and the rebirth of something entirely new and entirely free. Yet though she said her goodbyes, hung up her blood-stained dancing shoes, and placed her feet fully and comfortably on the earth, she will never forget the peaks, the highs, the soaring practically out of this world that maybe could not have been attained in any other way. The artist takes a risk, like the shaman. She must come close to the edge, one might say, of what may be reasonably endured, physically, emotionally, mentally and spiritually. Yet, if one is to touch what is sublime, one must allow oneself to be touched by the associated archetypes and all the dangers and perils inherent in doing so, in order to live more fully, in order to glimpse what maybe once the mystics glimpsed. The cost is high, but not to understand why these things might happen, or why they might seem justified, like the only thing to do, is to profoundly misunderstand our collective yearning for that which transcends the seeming blandness and even futility of life lived too safely. Through the power of its core myth, the genius of Tchaikovsky's music, and the sheer beauty of the ballet and its dancers, we are vicariously transported, swept away in the moment, in utter suspension of disbelief, to a place within ourselves where we too experience the apotheosis that redeems the tragic tale, and we too are lifted up and out of the illusion of our third-dimensional everyday existence, to glimpse, to touch, to feel the promise of the beyond.